Alright, this is Civil Rights 7. This is the last Civil Rights. This is after King, kind of going into modern affairs, okay? So in 1968, it's not just Dr. King. If you remember, I call it the year of coming apart. We have the police clash between protesters and everybody else at the Democratic National Convention. We have the Tet Offensive as well. Robert Kennedy is shot and killed by Sirhan, and George Wallace, the infamous guy of segregation now, segregation forever, will die from complications after he is shot. And so this is very, very chaotic in 1968, ultimately leading to Nixon becoming president and how he addressed civil rights. As I said, there is one of the pictures of the Democratic National Convention, one of the protesters who's actually been covered in blood given the sign. And so this doesn't look good in 1968. We've essentially lost the voice of reason, if you will, in Dr. King, and who's going to step up, who's going to take this mantle. Now, the Civil Rights Act of 1968 is passed largely in part because of the Lorraine Motel. Lorraine Motel was actually a cheaper motel that didn't discriminate, and so the Civil Rights Act of 1968 defines housing discrimination as a refusal to sell or rent to any person because of his race, color, religion, or national origin. You can't, if you're building a housing thing, you can't sit there and say it's an all-white housing, or it's an all middle class, or an all Asian housing. You can't do that anymore. And so that was that's the last of the big four Civil Rights Acts, so make sure you go back and look through those, okay? Now, some court cases, some really interesting court cases, some of these we've already talked about. In 1971, a man named Mr. Swan will sue the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Board of Education. To achieve affirmative action, to achieve these quotas, the federal government said, you're not going to get any federal money unless you prove to us you have this X number of African American students. Some people did not have that, so the southern states began to bus from further parts of different counties to achieve these racial quotas. Mr. Swan felt that this was inadequate and unfair, and so he sued the Board of Education doing this. And what they ultimately decided is school busing could be used to integrate schools and comply with the decision of Brown. So yes, they're legal so long as you're only doing it to achieve this racial balance, to force integration. And a lot of people didn't like this because they said, well, you're forcing integration on us, especially in what if our society doesn't have it, etc. And so there's a lot of backlash there, all right? Now, the other really big court case is kind of where affirmative action really becomes a bigger issue. In 1978, a man named Alan Backey is trying to enter law school? Med school. I think it's law school. Anyway. And so he's tried unsuccessfully twice. And so he sues the regents, or the board that gets people in, of the University of California. He says, I have actually been reverse discriminated against. And so affirmative action is now on the docket. It's now on trial. What they say here, okay, is that can race be brought up when you're going about an admission process of school? And they said, yes, race can be brought up. Are you allowed to have quotas? No, you are not. So if you remember, there was already one thing where he said quotas were okay, the Swan case. And here, 7 years later, they are now saying they are not okay. Why are they allowed to do that? The Constitution is a living document that changes as society does. Okay? Now, what's the big deal? Why are they so against racial quotas? I put this little guy here from South Park. His name is Token. Do you know why? He is the only black character on the show. Now, there's Chef, but Chef is a completely different animal here. So they might say, he's the token black guy, or the token Asian guy, or the token Mexican guy, or the token woman, etc. And so that's basically meaning we have this one person here done for it. And so they said the racial quota was actually going against what Dr. King wished, and that is you're only caring about the color of his skin. You don't care about the content of his character. You just want to have that token so that you can get federal money. And we have now completely missed the bar. Okay? Now, opponents of affirmative action. Affirmative action is still in place. Everyone that will go to college will be affected by affirmative action because they're going to look at your race. It can be a factor. Can it be the only factor? Absolutely not. So people who feel that affirmative action is wrong actually refer to it as reverse discrimination, meaning you're giving preferential treatment to targeted groups by excluding better qualified candidates who are not part of the preferred group. And so this continues to be a big discussion. I don't think we'll debate this because this could kind of get a little out of hand, but we definitely want to look at both sides here, and we'll do that in class, all right? Now, some first. With this now clearing the way, we have a lot of first. And so in 1979, Marion Barry becomes the first African-American mayor of a major city. He's mayor of Washington, D.C. And so that's a major accomplishment. A big city, a lot of people going through. We have an African-American leading the way. And so this is highly important for that reason. Now, in the 80s, there was a story that came out. If you remember, I said the FBI felt like there was an informant telling the FBI where Dr. King would be. And this story is going to say that that informant was Al Sharpton. Now, Al Sharpton has never fully come out and said, yes, I am an informant, I'm a snitch, or something like that. At the same time, he hasn't admitted that. And so he hasn't really come clean about what happened while this kind of occurred, okay? But there's the guy who I've been talking about in a lot of videos. I told you I'd bring him up. There you go. Now, in 1984, the first African-American candidate runs for president. It was not Barack Obama. It was Jesse Jackson. Now, who on earth is Jesse Jackson? Jesse Jackson was in Dr. King's inner circle, inner working. When he is actually shot up on that balcony, there's three really big people up there with him, and that is Ralph Abernathy, Al Sharpton, and Jesse Jackson. I mean, these people were his inner circle. So Jesse Jackson actually runs on a campaign called the Rainbow Coalition, meaning all different races and women, and trying to promote things, okay? He also runs again in 1988. He doesn't win. Also, 1988, we'll see kind of the construction and change of Lorraine Motel into becoming the National Civil Rights Museum. And so a woman named Jacqueline Smith feels that gentrification, which again is taking a part of society that could be used for better means, is an abuse of civil liberties. She has protested the Civil Rights Museum for, I can't remember the exact date. When we go to the museum, you'll see her. I'll take you over and let you listen to what she has to say, just as maybe an alternative. I think she's an interesting lady. But she feels that, in short, the Civil Rights Museum is doing a disgrace to Dr. King because the centers could be used for housing and for job training and for something else to get people out of poverty, which is what Dr. King was really about, not, as she calls it, the multi-million-dollar James Earl Ray exhibition. And so just kind of an interesting woman. I like to bring it up. Now, 1990, we have the first African-American governor. His name is Douglas Wilder, and he's from the state of Virginia. All right? And so we're getting really, really kind of interested here, right? Hopefully. Now, in 1991, we definitely take a step in the wrong direction. In 1991, we have Rodney King. And so Rodney King lived in L.A., and on TV, it is recorded, and he is beaten by the L.A. police. This leads to another series of riots, and a lot of people beginning the question of police brutality. It is not a new thing. It is not something that kind of came about with the Ferguson, Missouri thing and Mike Brown. It's been going on since 1991, and possibly even further back than that. But again, it's brought to our consciousness and we're seeing these things, okay? All right, in 2008, the first African American president is elected, Barack Obama. He has since served 2 terms, and in 2016 we'll have a new president. Um, but this is definitely a step in the right direction. Now, some people jokingly refer to Bill Clinton as the first African American president because of some of the things he tried to accomplish. Now, there is one more first here for you. Barack Obama, as president, is allowed to nominate his cabinet, and so he gives a very important cabinet position to an African American. Eric Holder becomes the first African American Attorney General, and also when dealing with something called the Fast and Furious scandal, he also becomes the first Attorney General to be basically held in contempt, which is kind of an interesting thing there, and we'll talk about that in the Fast and Furious. So that's it for civil rights. Make sure you look at this. There will be about 12 to 14 questions under state test about this. I want you to, this is the one that I really like to hammer because I think the way I've got it presented for you going in a chronological order will help you see kind of the patterns, and if not, definitely review, ask questions so that we can get this down, all right? We only have 4 days left of new things, all right? And the next thing is Mr. Reagan.